Welcome back to Behind the Print podcast, where we feature industry leaders and uncover the creative minds and their businesses within the world of professional printing. Our mission is to provide you with inspiring, actionable resources that elevate your business projects and accelerate your journey to excellence in profit and in print. Today's episode is Birds Doing Stuff. And joining me here today is the owner, photographer, and recipient of multiple photojournalism awards, Steve Jessmore. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Connor. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. So if you're ready, let's just dive right in.
Sounds good.
So, what made you get into photography, specifically wildlife and bird photography?
Yeah, in 2020 with COVID, I'd always been interested in wildlife, but never had an opportunity to do it. Families and raising kids and a job in photojournalism, which kept me mostly urban, just never really provided any time. And when COVID hit, I had nothing but time and went from over 100 invoices in 2019 to 6 in 2020 and was looking for something to basically do. And we had a cottage up north and we were restricted to stay at our homes. But when it opened up, I went up north. We spent a lot of time there and had never been in a kayak. I got in a kayak. I started taking my camera along, and literally one morning in about September, I was out in the kayak before dawn, and I had birds just buzzing me. And as a photojournalist, you would always have to bring back pictures, and I wasn't bringing back the pictures I was happy with. And I can honestly remember saying "game on," and that was the moment I started doing bird photography, and have been doing it with all my free time ever since.
So, you've obviously done a ton of photography from a kayak, from wetlands, other less forgiving terrain. What sort of challenges do you have when you're out getting pictures in these types of environments?
Yeah, the weather's probably the biggest one, just being prepared. But the biggest challenge for me was feeling comfortable taking a 600 millimeter lens on a kayak and a
Oh,
number of other
absolutely.
lenses along with me at the same time. And I was just really learn as I went. But the biggest challenge I have is mobility and just seeing your subject and being able to capture it. I like to stay in blinds. I like to
Mm,
sit in one place and observe what's around me. And then if I have an opportunity to kind of stalk with a kayak, to get a little closer, to get a better viewpoint, I do it. But you just have to really tread lightly, tread carefully, be aware of every movement you make. Don't do anything too fast, too erratic, and
don't want to
don't make
spook
any
them.
huge turns with that 600 when you're trying to track a bird. That you have to keep your balance.
So, when you're out on the kayak with that giant lens, obviously you're pretty afraid of dropping it. Do you put like a flotation device on it?
No, I just have it on a strap around my neck. And quite honestly, I don't even use a dry bag or anything anymore. So it's just I take the cameras out with me. I have one packed away in case it rains, but for the most part, I just have them ready and accessible to me. I've found as a photojournalist, your equipment you have to have it available if you're ever going to get the pictures. And I think I feel the same way with birds. For the most part, the 600 is my normal lens, and that's kind of my golden hammer. And it's a tool. And the first question I asked my insurance company was whether it was insured. And I told them what I was doing. And I told them 3 times what I was doing, that it was going to be on the water and I would probably drop it at some point. And they said, nope, you're insured. So I think that's really just key to feeling comfortable and feeling secure.
So, when you're shooting, getting pictures of these birds, are there particular seasons that yield better results, like maybe spring or fall during the migrations?
Yeah, that's absolutely, the case. Spring and fall are the time with most movement and most mobility for most birds. And summertime is it's really, really slow. Like right now, the last few months, it's just almost painful to sit out there, and it's hot. I generally only photograph for the first maybe 2 hours after sunrise, and I try to get out in place well before sunrise. And oftentimes I'll go back in the evening, the same thing, the last couple hours of evening. But I do believe that the fall and the spring are great. I personally love the winter the best. And we have a cottage on a river in northern Michigan, and we get a lot of the migratory birds from Canada. And my favorite birds, while I don't truly have a favorite, but my favorite type of bird is really ducks. I love ducks the best, at least to see ducks and to see the different kinds of ducks and to catch the different mating rituals and just the spunky activity when they're on the water with the other ones and, flying and, to see an eagle. If I see big flocks take off, I know there's an eagle coming, things like that. It's really a wonderful, it's just a refreshing when winter comes around to see all these different faces in our neighborhood. In summer, we have a lot less birds, mallards, the common kind of ducks that most everybody sees around. And also summer, the breeding plumage isn't around anymore. They start to molt, so they're not very pretty. So really, as you said, fall and spring are when they both hit, it's a wonderful time. Spring's always a problem for me though, because my day job with college photojournalism is in full peak with commencements and end of the semester and things like that. So that's the toughest challenge I have, quite honestly, is just for the most part miss most of migration because I have my other job. So I'm kind of looking forward to, I'm 65, so I'm kind of looking forward the next year or so, sort of scaling way back on the college and doing this full time and doing conservation work and conservation stories.
What kind of conservation work do you do?
I've been following, like the demise of a lot of little islands in our river, erosion of shoreline, loss of habitat. That's the number one problem facing birds and all wildlife probably right at this point, but especially birds. And our river, the Torch River in northern Michigan, is probably representative of many touristy kind of rivers where we have it's almost like Michigan I-75, at rush hour. It's just boats all traveling north to Torch Lake and to the sandbar where they all gather during the day to group and to party, and then the same thing, the return trip at the end of the day. And really for me, trying to document that kind of the calm before that storm of activity and after that storm of activity, what I've done quite a bit of. And so to try to, show the birds, but also be a voice for the birds. And that's kind of where I'm really headed with my work with a lot of endangered birds or, again, loss of habitat. I spent the summer more than 20 full days working on a bird called a piping plover. It's a
Hmm.
Great Lakes piping plover. And they're tremendously rare. There's less than probably 200 adult birds in existence.
Wow.
They're very tiny. They're very susceptible to predators and to a lot of other things. This year, there were a record about 90 nests throughout the Great Lakes. And I spent about 20 days documenting those birds. I had a cover story in 8 pages in National Audubon magazine that just ran this summer. So I'm continuing that project with these birds right now.
Okay, so the piping plover, aside from habitat loss, would you say that also maybe like invasive species has had an impact on them?
Not so much invasive species, but predators
Hmm.
gaining a foothold too, like merlins, coyotes, fox, anything that would go after a small bird. And they are quite small. They're the size of a robin or smaller. And the babies are about the size of a cotton ball. So babies are tremendously independent as soon as they hatch and they run around on the beach. And they can get stepped on, they can get dogs, dogs off leashes, many, many, many things. We'll take advantage of them. Green herons, great blue herons, they'll eat these little guys in one little grab. So it's very difficult for them to survive. There's a group that basically, with grants through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they're called exclosures. It's almost like a dog crate they place over the nest to give the nest at least a little bit of protection. Problem is, predators get smart and realize where the exclosures are, the birds are. But there's usually monitors with eyes on virtually every pair of plovers that they know of every day during the summer and kind of watching just to try to give them a little bit of an edge.
Like nest cameras?
No, monitors like real people just
Hmm.
out there volunteering and taking turns and making sure they're okay and just alerting people, educating people. The areas, they rope off areas, safety areas for the birds. It's psychological fencing. You could very easily just cross under the rope if you wanted to, but the thought is that people won't do it if they see this psychological nesting in the signage that says, hey, this area is for these little guys. They're mostly on the ground, especially the babies would be on the ground from the moment they're in the egg until about 3 weeks when they fledge, 23 days, I believe it is. So almost 2 months. There's three lines of plovers, East Coast, sort of in the central United States, and then the Great Lakes plovers. And the Great Lakes plovers are the really endangered ones. And they're spread out, but they're focused along the Great Lakes. And so that's where I've been spending my time. There was a nest in Chicago this year, right in downtown Chicago on Montrose Point. It's been there for 4 or 5 years. They've been returning different birds. Babies of the birds are now returning and having babies. But most of them are on, I went out to an island 47 miles out into Lake Michigan, photographed them too. They basically are in very isolated areas, most of them.
Well, the isolated areas I think might actually help them.
Yeah, probably. Again, except for those predators. It does protect them from people though, for the most part. And people bike on the beaches. They walk with their dogs on the beaches off leashes. If the birds aren't identified or people don't know they're there, it's pretty easy for a dog to just grab one or even to step on one. They kind of huddle in footprints or in depressions at times, like when they're afraid. So a lot of times they see somebody coming, they might just sink down in a footprint and you step right on them. So it's really difficult. You have to, again, this psychological fencing and the exclosures really help them.
Yeah, it's kind of like a baby fawn that hunkers down when you get close to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially they can't fly and they really can't scurry very far or very fast. So,
So, aside from ducks, what's your favorite bird species to photograph?
in all seriousness, it's the one in front of me. And I really do feel like that. I don't really go in search of anything per se. I have with piping plovers as part of a project this year, but I just really love watching bird behavior. And I was a photojournalist. I did people doing things. 99% of my shots had people doing their jobs or anything that you would have seen in a newspaper or on a news site. That was what my job was during the daytime. And a lot of government, a lot of meetings, a lot of happy moments and sad moments, everything in news photography. But with birds, it's really the same sort of thing, you know. I mean, I just love coming up on a bird that I didn't know was there. Or, I see one at a distance, and then maybe tomorrow I'll go over to that distance, wherever it was, and start out there. But I love watching how they live their lives, how they take care of their babies, and how they get here and there by flying or by swimming, or how they protect their home, their nest, and how they'll fight off things much larger than them. One of my favorite pictures shows a red-winged blackbird,
I
which are,
saw that with the heron.
yeah, they're just fierce and they are not afraid of anything. One week I got pecked on the head, I think 5 times by the same red-winged blackbird. Comes up behind you and just hits you in the back of the head as you walk by.
They're
Um,
territorial.
Very territorial, and most birds are. Plovers are very territorial for being a tiny little bird. It's just a wonderful thing for me. The challenge started immediately. I used to shoot pro sports a lot. I used to shoot spot news, people in action, people doing things again, not just sitting there posing for me. So when I started photographing birds, the first challenge I had were those ducks in the dark. And that's really what I like is to try to get past the perched bird, the bird sitting there. I want to get them hunting or grabbing that bug or actually get the bug and the bird in the same picture. Two birds is better than one in the same picture. The red-winged blackbird, the heron, just the interaction. They have emotion, I think, in similar ways to humans a lot of times. I think they're bummed if one of their own get killed or get hurt or is being threatened by somebody else. Just the rituals. I love watching the preening and the feeding and looking for food and whatever it is, protecting their babies. Just the different ways they do it. Our river's notorious for huge fish like muskie and snapping turtle. I had one snapping turtle just flip in front of me the other day, not 10 feet away from me. Huge turtle. These guys are just laying in wait for those baby ducks and baby geese. And one reason that's why they have so many babies, a lot of times because they lose so many. But a lot of ducks and species have figured out ways to protect their babies in the beginning. A female merganser or wood duck, a lot of times will have them on their back for the first week or two of as they're moving around through the open water, and then the large fish can't see them, they can't grab them. The same thing with loons. Loons will do that for the first couple of weeks. So it's just to me fascinating to see how birds and everybody adapt, and especially again with loss of habitat. And I've specifically watched, we had two little islands right near our cottage and didn't pay much attention to them before, but I've watched both that I found pictures from 10 years ago. They were 80 to 100 feet long. and they've disappeared. I watched them disappear from wakes and from people ramming their boats into them, and just literally floated away. Those are the sorts of things I'm watching as I photograph birds, trying to tell those stories as a photojournalist would. And not really to contrive any stories, but to notice what's going on around me and see what the problem is and try to show that.
Raise
I've done that with the
awareness.
Torch River. So I've been doing that for about 5 years now since COVID and noticing that. And this year I actually approached a number of conservation groups and they took the ball and ran and have posted the areas now. Posted one of the areas that I think is pretty much it's gone, anyway. But they've posted another area that I know there's still hope to hopefully protect it and keep it. And the sheriff's departments have gotten on board. They're starting to ask people to leave the areas and things like that. And that all started with the power of a photo and documenting that. And so that's the kind of work I hope to do in the future. It's not to say boaters are bad or anybody's bad. It's just, I think we can all make wise decisions to protect what's around us. And maybe we can park someplace else for a little bit or not think like we have to park wherever we want.
Mm.
So
Do you get much support from like game wardens?
I haven't dealt much with the Department of Natural Resources, but what I did do, like I said, we did approach the sheriff's departments, which patrol the rivers, and the DNR does too, and they've also started supporting, trying to get people to please stay off these areas. The two areas that I'm talking about on the Torch River protect, they call it a bayou and a lagoon, whether they're really a bayou or not, but they're large bodies of water that are quiet that the boat wakes don't get because of these two ridges of land. And the ridges of land started to breach last year. So what I've made that pitch to not so much game wardens, but the powers that be in Michigan Eagle and Michigan DNR and the sheriff's departments, and they all see the value and they've all told me it's totally documented to what's happening. I think they're happy to be on board and to know the problems there and to try to help too.
So obviously you do a lot of work in wetlands and marshes. Do you go out and get wildlife photography in other types of environments like forests, meadows, things like that?
Occasionally, but I tend to really love the water. So I'm really a swamp slash marsh, edge of river, kayak, paddle in someplace where nobody knows I'm there. And I can sit there, even if I hear all those boats going by, and I can sit there in my own little world. And maybe they're a little world where they've retreated to at this moment, the birds and things like that. That's what I like. I do some forest photography, but not much. I've traveled a bit. I've traveled for Audubon down to Cumberland Island, Georgia for the plovers. I actually photographed the same exact plover that I found in Michigan down in Cumberland Island. You can tell by the bands on their legs.
Mhm.
That's one unique thing about these birds. They all have names, even the people name them because of the bands. And there's quite a network of people that do that. So I'm a newbie birder, honestly. Like I'm 5 years into it. I never had any interest before that. I've been propelled sort of into it by winning the National Audubon Contest. The first year I entered, I swept the professional division. The second year I entered, I also took the most creative picture out of the 10,000 plus images. I never had any thought about doing it. I was posting during COVID. I was making people happy that couldn't get out. That's what I tend to think most of my photography, even as a journalist, I like to highlight stories that were positive and that gave people hope. I worked in Flint, Michigan, even, which is the town that, right away. So what I would try to do is I did a column in Flint called Sense of Community that highlighted those people that were trying to make grassroots changes to make it a better place and still had hope. I feel the same way about my birds and about my wildlife. And if I can make people happy, that's a really cool thing. Everything else sort of takes care of itself, it seems like. But that's really, I think, where I've landed, and I feel really blessed, that I really do feel like I do that. And um, one day, honest to God, I was like paddling down the river before dawn, and I put the paddle across my lap, and but I was just thinking I got to do something with these pictures. And I looked to my right, honest to God, 3 feet away, 4 feet away was a loon looking at me, just paddling right down with me, like right next to my kayak. It was like at that moment I really realized that was kind of my sign, and I had realized I needed to do something more, but that was the moment where I really realized that, man, they don't have a voice and I do have a voice and I can do this kind of work and with my contacts and hopefully with whatever talents I have, I can use them to, like I said, make people happy, maybe make people aware, maybe make my backyard a little bit better place, the river. So most of my work, all my life, if you talk to anybody, they'd say I was a community journalist. I never left, uh, for the most part, the communities I was in. I worked in Flint, I worked in Saginaw, I worked in Myrtle Beach. I would cover Detroit sports and things like that, but most of my work was right there. I didn't long to go to Iraq or Iran or the Gulf War or travel all the time or anything like that. I like telling stories of my neighbors. I never get bored. I have a thing up on my wall about contentment. I'm very content, but I'm very content from a standpoint of not taking things for granted, but being able to find interesting things and change where I am and being that kind of content. I don't need to worry about the way I feel is if the world needs to be taken care of. But if we all worried about what was around us and took care of what was around us, it would all add up cumulatively to make the world a better place. That's my philosophy. And that's what I do with birds. And that's what I do. Again, trying to make people happy around me, give them a bright spot in their days with all the negative news and the negative vibes, around. And to be able to see a cool bird picture or a cool, even, I mean, this weekend I was in my kayak for the first time in forever. And I think my wife even texted me. She's like, are you okay? Like, why are you out so long? And I said, oh, yeah, I'm fine. And I think I spent 6 hours out in the kayak that morning. And I literally was like the last 2.5 hours mesmerized by white lotuses and honeybees, like coming in and out of honeybees. And I sat there with my 600 and tried to tread water in my kayak and stay in the same places. And I could do that forever and just try to make really cool pictures of the stuff that's around me. I'm just finishing up a project around town here in Grand Rapids. So there's a beautiful boardwalk at Reed's Lake in Grand Rapids, right East Grand Rapids, right in the heart of the city. I spent in 3 years over 200 mornings there. I started my day off there at 5:36 in the morning. I'd go for an hour or two, and then whenever I could, and then I'd come home and edit or do the rest of my work. But I would start my day out there, and so I've done a project on that I'm pitching right now. And again, just appreciating what's in our backyards and what is so important for us to save because nobody else is going to save it.
So going back to that place you mentioned in Grand Rapids, is that your favorite place to go kayaking?
And it's my favorite place to just be patient on the boardwalk in all seriousness. So I've taken the kayak out maybe 5, 6 times there. But the challenge I challenged myself was to say if I was on this boardwalk, like is 241 steps out into the lake, I won't get bored. And I can create a tremendous body of work from this boardwalk by watching the seasons and watching the movements of the birds and things like that. And if I can do it with my lens, that means anybody, a person in a wheelchair, a person in pushing their baby carriage. I have a 12 power lens. You know what? You can get binoculars that are 12 power. If you want to sit there, you could have seen every single moment and thing I saw if you just are patient and want to pay attention. And so that was my goal with that project rather than I think it's really important just to narrow and focus things down like that instead of spraying it with a fire hose the whole Reeves Lake. I mean, I'm sure I could have got more diversity and variety in certain areas of the lake if I would have kept going there and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? I saw probably 90% of it right from that couple hundred steps. And it was a great way to see the mornings and meet people and talk to people and spread the word. That was the coolest part. I made so many cool friends and I'd see the same people walking and like my favorite was like these two ladies that I never got to know, but I'd be down in camo and I'd be like leaning by the railing and just sitting there and just watching. And they'd see me from down the boardwalk and yell, "Hey, have you seen the eagle yet today?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, 10 minutes ago. You just got to be quiet and watch." And So it's about trying to educate and getting people to understand we're not watching a television program or that these animals are wild and you just have to use some patience and some respect. And I met so many great people there and had so many great experiences. And again, I feel like I'm sort of a representative of nature. Again, that loon, that bird, that merganser, that whoever's there in that little marsh. I'm telling people what I'm seeing and how valuable this is and how cool it is. And this is their backyard. I live 10 miles away or whatever, but it's still kind of my backyard. So I guess at being a people photographer my whole life, that pictures couldn't be published without a person in them 99% of the time. It's kind of the opposite now. I got carte blanche. I've got first time I've ever owned my photography is this wildlife stuff. I've always worked for somebody else and they all own my copyrights and my images. I can't even get them to show people in a lot of them at least. And so, for me, this is anything goes and I can do, the sky's the limit. So again, the birds doing stuff came from this sort of situation. When I won the Audubon and I couldn't tell anybody for 2 months, and 3 days before the deadline, I finally told one of my buddies, I said, I got to tell somebody it's going to be announced in 3 days. And we were on the deck drinking bourbon up north, watching the river go by. And I said, I won this National Audubon contest, 10,000 entries. I won first and the only honorable mention. I'm not sleeping at night. I'm waking up in a cold sweat thinking, what are people going to think? Here's this newbie photographer that's never entered before. He enters 4 pictures and 2 of them win, sweep the division. I've never even had a wildlife picture published at that point. And it's like, what are people going to think of me? I'm waking up literally in the middle of the night, like just freaking out. And we talked a little bit, and he said, your pictures are just different. They're birds doing stuff. And he said, you take a little bit different approach than most of the photography I see at this point. And I said, well, I guess maybe that's true, but I feel a lot of people do it, especially now. And the technology's gotten better and all those sorts of things. But that's where birds are doing stuff came from. And for me, it's kind of like I have that lowest common denominator in my mind. And if I look at that picture, it's like, well, is that bird doing anything? Is it doing stuff? Like, well, the picture I'm editing, it's not doing anything. Okay, we move on, and so that's it's been a great challenge and a great goal and a great like path to learn trademarking and, to just take something that I own and see where it can go, So I do all my exhibitions under birds doing stuff. I've done, I had to prove to get the trademark, I had to prove everything, like every different class. So I did 2 coloring books, I did 2 calendars, I did note cards, I did all this stuff. And that's where the printing center comes in.
We appreciate it.
I have done like 5 calendars through you guys in the last few years, and I've worked my way up to about 1,000 calendars a year now, and this year it might even be more the way it looks. So I really appreciate that support I've gotten from all you guys, in all seriousness, that give me all these different options, that I don't have to, I have to, build them, but I don't have to get the inkjet, cartridges out and replace them every 10 minutes sort of thing, and it's all at a price, quite honestly, that is marketable. And I've appreciated that.
Oh, absolutely. We appreciate the business. So, going back to what you had previously said, that major photography award, are there any other milestones that really defined your career as a wildlife photographer?
I've had multiple covers now on National Audubon magazine, but this last cover in story was a big milestone for me. I think it all started out with a call from the photo editor that said I won the National Audubon contest, and a conversation, with her, that I was a photojournalist. And then the next year she said, this is getting old hat. You're back again. And I said, yeah. And we talked some more. And she said, if you ever have ideas, why don't you pitch them to me? And so I started pitching her ideas, and we still have a regular call virtually every month with the national photo editor of Audubon. And that turned into her seeing my work ethic and my work, and not just the contest work, but everything I do. And then having local story that she said, would you like to shoot it? And I'm like, heck yeah. So that story gave me about 10 days of work in Michigan and then a trip to Cumberland Island, Georgia in the wintertime. And it ended up being 8 pages of photos and a cover story in the magazine, which to me is really cool. I was always a publication journalist, but mostly newspapers. And I would always work on stories, but always newspapers, and so this has been a wonderful milestone that took me back to the days where I used to do that all the time in newspapers, these long-term stories. So I'm a long-term story guy. I love to take an idea and run with it over. I did a leader dog story that won the Robert F. Kennedy Award, and they give out one in the country and one in the world, really. That story took 17 months from the well, probably longer than that, just trying to figure out the logistics. But 17 months of shooting from the first day the leader dog was in a school till when I finished up with the blind person it was matched with when in Missouri, that the dog was raised in Michigan and went to Missouri. And I went out there and documented that too. That's the kind of thing that I just really love to see how, like, again, some little kids made a difference to this blind person thousands of miles away just by raising a leader dog in a school for a year. And they gave him his sight back, really, that he was able to get around and get to church again and get to wherever just because of what they did. So those are the kinds of things I really love doing, finding a solution, finding a positive out of, again, efforts that we all put in with the ups and the downs along the way and hopefully having a successful outcome. And that's what I'm trying to do with the birds now. So these milestones, I don't know what the next milestone quite honestly could be. Having won the National Audubon a couple times, I don't even enter anymore. I think just continually being published. I think my next goal is I'm working on a multiple things that I hope can be books. That's part of the plover plight right now that I'm doing. And I really hope that'll be the next milestone maybe in my life. And other than that, I just really hope to see like my islands survive in up north. That would be a milestone to get people on board and realize how important they are to sway public opinion, that sort of thing. But the cover story went a long way into hitting a milestone that really is going to help me, I think, this last one.
Well, when it
So,
comes to the book of the piping plovers, we can definitely help you reach that milestone.
or I may have to contact you guys. I'm really hoping that'll become a reality soon, and it won't be from lack of trying. And that's the thing I think with photography that I think most people don't understand. Like I just spent 20 some days not getting paid in hotels and mileage and equipment. And I just sent my camera in that got trashed out on the beach and all those sorts of things, countless days and leaving at 4:30 in the morning to get there well before sunrise to where I was getting and staying till afternoon. And the same thing on the boardwalk, to spend 2, 3 hours out there just sitting and being patient. And I think a lot of photographers, when they ask what they can do to get better, I think that's the one thing they can do to get better. Not we have so much instant gratification nowadays with social media or with whatever television show you want to watch. I had 3 channels growing up. Now we got what 3,000 channels and subscription services. And you know what I mean? We're so scattered. And I think there's again, the same thing like, well, I don't really want to get out of bed at 4:30. I don't really want to stand here in the rain for 2 hours. I don't want to. There's a lot of I don't want us. And I think, if you want to get better, you got to, number one, appreciate the light, get out early and experience what the light is the first 2 minutes when the sun's just peeking over the horizon, and see what a change it makes in your photography and your images, or to stay there by the same nest and get one picture after 9 hours or something like that. But to have that patience for that shot, and that's what I try to do. I have a no cell phone rule when I'm out. Like you will rarely see me looking at a cell phone and taking my eyes away from whatever I'm trying to watch. And for me, it is being out there with birds or being whatever. Even a bad day is a good day. There's no bad bird that's in front of me, or I just truly get amazed every single day. My wife actually every day she'll say, "How was your day?" And I'll say, ah, it's the best day ever. And she'll laugh at me. And you say that every day. And I say, I don't know. It really was great. It was just different than the other best day. And that's hopefully words of wisdom and that I have hopefully a number of years still to add to. So.
Hmm. So, a few more questions for you. What are some challenges or obstacles that are holding you back right now, either like personally or professionally?
Yeah, for me, it's the balance of making money versus making pictures that I want to make, and just time is always the challenge, I feel like is the biggest challenge. And beyond that, that is my biggest challenge. I think time enters into so many different categories. The other category would be knowing how to do something I haven't done, like doing a book and finding the publisher and a distribution network and like the logistics. I've done the logistics of building books and building coloring books and having you guys print them or whatever, but it's just the unknown factor about getting something out there and I, I'm a one-man team like many, many, many people are nowadays. So I want to be the creative, but then the other side of me tells me I got to buckle down and do my quarterlies or I have to add up all my receipts this week or I got to get all my print orders out or I got to do all these things that keep my butt in the chair here at the desk. And that's a huge challenge too, is just to budget time and also to balance the time because you want to do that, but I also want to balance time with my spouse and my family and all that sort of stuff. So there's all those like things that tear you one way or another. But as a sole proprietor, a person that really depends on myself to make all my income and do everything I need to do, it's the time is always forefront, I guess.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about the shutdown, where when you have nothing but time, I can definitely see how that really catapulted your career into where it is now.
Yeah, it sure did. And it was thankful to my wife to sit me down and say, look, man, this is a gift of time. You are so blessed to have this time. You need to make the best out of every day. It could be your last. Who knows how much time God's going to give you? And you just need to find what you always wanted to do and do it. And honest to God, when she said that to me, my mouth dropped. I'm like, I don't know what I always wanted to do. Like, I had no idea at that point, and it took me a few months to figure that out. But I'm glad she gave me that talk because I had that time, and what I was going to use it for probably wasn't the best of use. I was going to try to get better at lighting or try to call people and say, hey, photographer, I really respect you, but how did you do this? How did you do that? That sort of thing. And just at a lower key pace, not really creating, but trying to learn. And I thank her. I'm just so blessed every day that she's the one that put me on that path to figure out what I really wanted to do, not how to get my business better or something, but to really what was going to make me happy. And she's still that way. She's still like, yeah, you're good. Go. Just go do whatever you need to do. And I'll be here when you get home. And it's like, wow, this is wonderful. I never was fortunate like that most of my life. So,
Yeah, the same thing kind of happened to me during the pandemic. I went from having no time at all to all the time in the world. So I
yeah.
can I can definitely relate to that.
And it's really easy to get lost in all that time in the world. Like it just passes and you do nothing with it.
And then after it passes, you're thinking like, what happened? What
Right.
did I
No, I'm
do?
so blessed that I locked onto something. It took me a while, but I always thought about that talk she had. And it took me a little while to get my wheels turned in the right way. But once I did, I never looked back. And once those ducks flew over my head and I couldn't get them, honest to God, it was game on. And I came up with a plan to get better at what I was doing. And I did. I didn't know that was my purpose at the moment, but it was something that fulfilled the time and gave me a new creative outlet. And it didn't take long for it to like really get weighted that this is the most important thing I want to do, especially tying in the journalism and the conservation and all that stuff with it. I have a biology degree too from college way back when. I'm sort of mixing all my art, my biology, my journalism, everything together for the first time in one path. The weird thing is I never had a business class in my life. And so these sorts of things are the things that oftentimes I get lost in and feel like I'm spinning my wheels. So
Yeah, the devil's in the details.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think I already know the answer to this next question, but if you had a day completely free to spend however you like, how would you spend it?
Yeah, I would definitely be doing creating something. And I think I would go back and forth to saying, "Oh God, I got a whole day and I can edit all day long, and I can go back to stuff a year ago and edit it finally." And I would either do that or I would say, "Nah, I want to get out and create." And I would be out there at again 4:30 in the morning and stay out the majority of the day. And that's truly for me the when I do have a free day, it's like the little guy on either shoulder saying, "No, but you need to edit. No, you need to go out. You want to go shoot though. No, you need to edit." So I kind of fight myself with that. But though that's a perfect day for me that I could just be out there. And again, a bad day is even if I don't see a lot, it's a good day, you
Bad
know.
day
And
is a good day.
yeah, that kayak is the probably best tool I ever got in my life. Again, the 600 and the Sony A1s and all that, those are my golden hammers. Those are the tools. Those are the pro tools I need for whatever job I'm doing. But man, that kayak sure gave me mobility and something it opened up so many just like it's almost like you're playing a link game or something online when you go through the secret passageway and oh my God, look at this little pond back here, or look at this little ecosystem. I looked at those lilies the other day and I'm shooting the birds going in and or the bees going in and out, and then I zoom in on it and there's like countless bugs in this little ecosystem on that lily too. And you start dissecting it and looking at, I guess I'm curious. And the curiosity factor for me just, I'm always like, I'm just wide-eyed all the time, still seeing all this kind of stuff. I'm content and definitely curious. So those are two good things for me. So those would be involved in that day that I could do anything for sure. So.
When you're out there on your kayak, are you trying to blend in like you are on land? Like you mentioned, you were all wearing all camo on land. Is that also the same on your boat?
Yeah, totally. I never felt legit enough to wear camo because I never hunted. I never did anything. I never did outdoor stuff. And I always thought, that's pretty cool. I wish I could wear camo, but I didn't. And then I started doing a little bit of wildlife photography and I don't know where I was. I bought a pullover with camo and I went out the next day. It was like night and day. It was so different. The birds like didn't see me and I had the hoodie up and all that. But what I learned, early on, I won the Audubon really quickly in my career. And so like I said, got kind of propelled in an area I wasn't planning. And I had this television, like a nature program, come and do a story on me. It's called Destination Michigan. And they were doing a thing on rivers and my river photography. Well, the videographer flew a drone over me. And
Mm.
here I am in my shorts and my camo top in my green kayak, and I'm in the middle of this gorgeous pond with all these lily pads, and here's these two white legs just like blinding. And I thought, my God, look what the birds are seeing, these two white legs down there. And I bought a pair of camo pants at that moment. My closet used to be lined up with quarter zips from every college I photographed for. That was part of the contract. Give me a quarter zip so I can blend in when I'm at school. That's my camo, like the Central Michigan or Michigan State or whatever, it looks like I belong. Well, it's the same thing with camo. When you're out in nature, like act like you belong. I do have camo for all seasons. And the last thing I need is a good walk around pair of camo pants. And that's next on my list. But I think I got everything else. And so it does help. I've had like swans come flying at me full blast because they had no idea what I was in camo. I had a beaver come up where I could have reached down just like that next to my kayak and grab his head if I would have moved and he would have stayed put. I mean, he was hugging my kayak looking at me. And they just don't figure out what you are. And it makes all the difference in the world to be prepared. And whether you're shooting a cold weather assignment and being prepared for the cold, or I'm being prepared to be invisible and to be the observer. And I think that's as important, the kayak, the the camo and obviously the skills of learning and increasing your skills to capture these things and learning what shutter speeds to use and what f-stops and what kind of light you're looking for and what works best and how to approach a bird and when you know they're going to fly and watching all the observations like that, that's all so important. But if you can't get the birds close enough to you, and even with that big lens, they need to be close to you. That's a key thing. I've had so many great moments, honest to God, where I'm laying there in camo and like I'll have a bird fly in just like 15, 20 feet from me and sit there. And here I'm really still and I'm photographing. I think, oh, that was really a fun minute or two. And then I'll look at the timestamp and it was like 12 minutes or something. And
Time flies when you're having fun.
it really is true. And just watching it almost in slow motion, all the little movements. And camo is a big part of being accepted. So
I
yeah.
recommend you take a look at it's called Sitka gear camo. In my experience, that stuff works like a charm.
I've
Like
got a ton of it.
you've
Yeah.
got you've got Sitka, that stuff works so
Yeah.
well.
I do in the spin-off from Sitka, it's called Kuiu, Kuiu.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them.
I have equal amounts of both, probably. So yeah, like I said, I've locked on those two brands from virtually everybody I know. So yeah.
Yeah, that's in my experience, I've had animals walk right up to me while I'm wearing Sitka gear.
Yeah.
Well,
I was in the
anyway,
driveway and I up north and I had full Sitka on and everything. And I'm standing in the driveway and I would walk 10 feet and stop and walk 10 feet and stop and stand there for a minute or two. And all of a sudden, like I'm standing there and I just turned and there was a doe not like 10 feet from me. Oh my God, did I freak her out? She had no idea I was standing in the middle of the driveway and she just bleated for about 2 miles. I could just hear the bleat, 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 bleat. It must have lasted 2, 3 minutes. Just freaked her out. But it's really kind of cool to think that that really does make a difference. But
hmm
it does. It's not just like what I thought maybe back in the day of belonging or looking cool or whatever. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely attest to the effectiveness of Sitka. Well, one last question for you. How can our listeners get in touch with you, learn more about your work, or maybe even collaborate with you on a project?
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm online. I'm on Instagram at sjessmo, SJESSMO. But if you search my name, Steve Jessmore, it will come up. But also by reaching out through my website, it's just stevejessmore.com. You can type in birds doing stuff and it'll take you to stevejessmore.com. So that's kind of cool too. And but Instagram and Facebook, Facebook, I post more often than not. And I built really a good following. I think I sold calendars last year and prints to 38 states just off Facebook and off my Instagram and stuff like that. So I've got a pretty good following of people that have reached out, and I do enjoy talking it. So I would be more than happy to help anybody with a question and I would love to collaborate with some great writers or some other great photographers, and I tend to be a loner, to be honest, like a lot of times when I'm out shooting, but I do enjoy working on projects with people and again, answering questions. I hope to do some more seminars and workshops. I've been doing some teaching, um, occasionally for Central Michigan University, but I hope to get some other stuff going too soon. So,
All right. Well, did you have any questions for me?
um, off the whatever. I mean, basically, I wanted to ask you about I got this list of all these different things that said you guys will do for me, but I really didn't understand what a lot of them are. So I
Mhm.
was going to talk to you briefly about that. But no, I appreciate you doing this, and this is wonderful that you've taken notice. And I love watching my birds doing stuff migrate from you to me, and it's really cool to see the boxes come and to pull open the boxes and look at the note cards and the envelopes and or the whatever printed materials and see the joy that they bring to people. So now you've been a huge part of my growth curve and my learning experience, and so I do appreciate y'all being there,
Yeah,
especially
we
if I ever have
appreciate
a
you taking
problem.
the time to chat with us.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful, and like I said, it's for the most part that you're the only guys I've ever used for my calendar, so I don't
Again, we
have
appreciate that.
any plans to change. They're wonderful, and people always comment like just the great quality and the photography, and so I feel that's a big part of it. So it's great. It's really cool seeing them too when I go around town, or I'll go into Target and there's my calendar in the pharmacy or in the, whatever. And it's like, it's neat to see people enjoying, your work and mine. So yeah.
I'd say mostly yours.
Well, yeah, but everything needs a vehicle, and I've learned that with photography. You have to have it printed right, and it has to be your vision. And if it isn't, especially when things like Purge, the lighting conditions are very difficult and contrasty and dark. And so if we can handle that together, I guess that's why I'm not going anywhere else. So it's nice that we've been able to handle all that together. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right. Well, I'd say that's a wrap on another episode of Behind the Print. Let me say that again. Well, I'd say that's a wrap on another episode of Behind the Print. Thank you, Steve, for joining us, and thank you to our listeners as we explored the artistry and innovation of the printing world. Remember, having a strong vision, building the right strategy, and using tools like print to amplify your message will make your brand stand out from the crowd. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to get your sample pack today from PrintingCenterUSA.com and share it with your fellow business enthusiasts. Until next time, keep those creative sparks flying, and remember, there's always more to discover behind the print.